This is actually, all this is our second to last full-length message here online. I know, right? It's kind of bittersweet or something. But there's not without good reason. This is the second last one because next week is Graduation Recognition Sunday. Again, if you're watching in sequence, and because things are returning back to normal, we want to make sure that we move everything back to more in person, outings, meetings, so on and so forth. Speaking of outings, just real quick, I know, gotta stay on one track, but still time to kind of sign up for the mission trip. It's just like a day and a half, 2-day kind of thing, an overnight, awesome time, doing some work, helping another ministry out. And that if you need help, just email me, jthomas@lifepointpa.org. I'll get you set up, no big deal, and because time is ticking. But do it quick if you want to sign up. Also, again, Graduation Recognition Sunday, June 13th. We have a gift for you if you are graduating. We want to recognize you, and just very excited to kind of get back to that as well. All right, so go back to the other track that I was on. We got to move the train. This is the second to last full-length video. Next week will be the last for graduation recognition. And from there on, it'll simply be kind of a devotional recap each week. So we will have something online kind of talking a little bit about the lesson from the following week. And that way, if you have missed anything at any point, you can at least kind of be in the loop. So with that, today's message is actually called Standing Stones of Remembrance. This is just a one-off message, kind of reflecting back on, well, kind of the year, kind of also being so close to Memorial Day. Just felt like this was a really good message, just kind of as we move past the school year. Just an interesting kind of time to reflect. So, Standing Stones of Remembrance, as I said, and our main text, our Bible reference, is Joshua chapter 4. It's the whole chapter. We won't be reading all that. We will take some snippets out of there. But I would encourage you to take the time, read all of Joshua if you can. But the main point is to kind of zero in on these standing stones and what they mean, and let's actually talk about that. Each of us has some kind of memorial, right, in our lives. Okay, so what do I mean by memorial? Well, it can be some obvious thing that holds some kind of great significance. It could be a gift, a picture, an heirloom, some memento of a trip, or something small that, or something expensive, like you said, an heirloom. One of those things that just kind of triggers a thought or a reflection or a memory. Other memorials may have kind of a different kind of significance. It's like maybe going to a cemetery. And you kind of know what I mean. If you've gone with your parents to the graveside of somebody, it just has that different kind of feel going. And visiting, it just triggers stuff, and so it's a very powerful thing, and that's why I think one of the reasons we're going to talk about it today. Such memorials are in ways which we choose to remember those great events or people that had some sort of impact or impression on our lives, lasting, And that's what's so amazing about that ability that God has given us to reflect on those things. And what we see in Joshua 4, the Hebrews create these special altars that served just as opportunities to have that remembrance in their lives as individuals, lives as a people, as God's chosen people. Right? And so God uses this, as we'll see, as a powerful thing in the lives of the Hebrews. he also, through this, urges you and I to set up ourselves occasions of things in our own lives to tell our own God stories, right? To tell yours and or mine, and that they have these just ways to come up and present what God has done. So through the telling of these stories, each of us can become, in a sense, living stones of remembrance. Now, I'm mentioning it here because I think that that's kind of the ending thought where we want to land. But I want to mention it now because as we talk about the physical stones and becoming living stones, I want you to see how we get from one to the other. And that's kind of the end point. I know it's kind of odd to bring it up now, but I want you to kind of see how we leave from one to the other. In Joshua 4, we see a couple of occasions where Joshua and the Hebrews erect stones of remembrance. So we're going to read some verses about that. And starting with verse 3, this is chapter 4, verse 3. God's saying, command them, saying, take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. Okay, so that's one example. Take stones, not just little stones, take these giant stones out of the Jordan. It should be said, if you have not been to the Jordan, I know I haven't personally, I know many who have, and from my understanding and by all accounts, it looks like a normal, rather large river in many spots. But what sets it apart is it's really deep river, which is not very common. And the other thing, it has a tendency to be really high, like flow, like it is moving swiftly in most spots. So taking stones out of there, not always an easy job. So God's command here to take anything out of the Jordan, big stones especially, is not going to be an easy task. There has to be purpose and intent with it. So God's just saying, don't do this halfway, do it right. Get these big things, so by the time you stack up 12 stones, it's going to be noticeable from a distance. Just food for thought. Verse 9 says, Joshua, set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. And then we jump to verses 19 and 20. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day in the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. Okay, so 3 separate times the people set up 12 stones in 3 different places. The rocks would be rocks they would see and pass by as they were set up in their own lands, right? So as you're traveling from one place to another, even as Joshua and his group would come back from wherever they were going, after they said, they would instantly see these standing stones, these large stacks. And the other thing, this is what I like, their children's children would literally see these rocks and could ask, why are these rocks here? So that would give someone the chance, those rocks would trigger the question, and that would give someone the chance to offer the story, to reflect on what God did that day or that occasion. Now beyond the physical nature of the rocks, or setting up the memorials or places of remembrance, there is something deeper completely here spiritually. In other words, clearly it's not just the rocks themselves that are the important things. They serve a purpose, but they're not the important things themselves. It's what the rocks represent that holds the great significance. Right? So where does that significance lie? Well, God's incredible power, his provision for his people is not found in the rocks. I mean, I know I keep saying that, but it kind of bears repeating. The stacks represent the significance. Those stacks represent something greater. It is, the significance or the story, as it were, is found through the person telling that story, that what God did, sharing what God's power and provision is. It's the person. So when in that scenario where the children's children of the children or whatever ask the question why that's there, it is God using that person to share that story, to carry on the memory, the memorial of what God did. When God does something in our lives, we cannot help but tell others of God's incredible power and provision. I mean, or at least that's how it should be, right? I know I have. Maybe I haven't done as much as I should have. And that's what we're talking about here. These stones would last, if undisturbed, as they should be, to always bring up an opportunity to recall something. And while we should strive for this, we should always want to share amongst each other what God, and to anyone, what God has done, how He has changed or bettered our life, or given us new and better direction, or whatever. This is how it should be. Instead of the rocks being the ones that tell the story, the people, you and I, the Hebrews back in the story, become the living stones of remembrance, right? That's why it's important to hold on to those moments, those instances, those circumstances where God has shown up and done something. We carry on and share that with other people, and that impacts their lives. And that's really what we're talking about. It becomes a testimony, and our testimonies to God's redemption are the single greatest memorial you and I can have. That's what it means to have a testimony. What life was like before God or Christ did something, and life after God, Christ did something, bringing redemption, bringing salvation. Let's not forget how that happened and share that with people. Think of your God stories like glimpses into the past where God was at work. He showed up, right? That's why we need to hold on to that and build something or have something that triggers that memory, right? And that's exactly the point of the stacked stones, the 12 stones in the story from Joshua. It's other places too. Other people did it. I think I want to zero in on Joshua because it just seems to happen a lot. But this is the point of it all. Just one like kind of more modern view of this. Kind of just a closing thought. If you've kind of ever seen anything like extreme hiking or anything on, I don't know, any of the many channels that exist. But a lot of people who do, groups that do long distance hikes, Appalachian Trail or around the world or whatever, or even some people who climb, there is a practice of stacking stones. And those stacked stones are, again, a common practice among those groups, those people who are avid hiking and climbing and things like that. But those stacked stones are called cairns, and they're meant to guide those who are hiking or climbing. They're meant to guide those so that they don't get lost or wander off the true path, the true trail, back to where they need to go. And to me, like, I can't think of a more appropriate example, kind of in a modern setting of what we're really kind of talking about. I like the parallel here. Someone leaving a marker for the right path for those that follow behind them, right? Not just following that day, but in the future. Someone else finding that trail and feeling like maybe they don't know where they're going, and they see these stacked stones as a beacon to say, no, this is the right path. Follow where I've been, right? And I think that's why it's so important to make my encouragement today. Make some sort of marker to remind you of God's work in your life, whatever that marker might be. Make it a memento, make it a bookmark in your Bible, make it a note in your Bible, something. And one of those things, make a marker so that those who follow, that when you share that, it'll guide others to follow in the path that you had, the right path to safety. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day, and we'll talk to you.